everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Designing with Angie. I'm Angie Method and I'm a vector artist and graphic designer. Today I'm going to be talking to you about precision while you are drawing with Adobe Illustrator. So, it's been quite a while since my last video and I've wanted to apologize about that. However, the reasons are that my life has been quite busy until now, but also there are already so many tutorials when it comes to Adobe Illustrator that I've wanted perhaps to refine my content and make it a little more worthwhile. So today I'm going to be covering precision drawing in Adobe Illustrator. This week I've been doing a little bit of isometric drawing for work, and I've encountered that sometimes when you're doing high precision drawings, it's a little tough to really align paths and shapes properly, so I thought I'd just bundle a couple of tips and tricks and share them with you on how to bypass this problem. I hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and also to comment down below if you have any questions or remarks you want to do. Thank you. So the first method I'm going to be explaining right now is what I call the cookie cutting method. It's something which is very nice when you're making quite complex art, like the portrait I've made here, and you want really high precision results. As you can see, I've already used it in some places here on my board. If I check the shadow here on the cloth, the outline is perfectly matching that of the clothes she's wearing. So here, for instance, we have a shadow, but as you can see, it's not really precise. And it's something I see a lot when I do collaborations or when I work with other people. It's just something random. What we can tell from this is it was hand-drawn, but looking at the rest of the drawing, we can see that it doesn't really match up what I have already here, like the shape of the face. So what we want to do is make sure, of course, that we create something that's a total match and that's going to look good. So switching to the direct selection tool, I'm going to make a copy here of the face, of the outline. I'm going to paste it in front of everything, and I'm just gonna make sure it's aligned already. I'm gonna nudge it a little just so it's more or less in place. There we go. I'm now going to copy here the body part of the drawing that I made, because we want this here, the final result, to be a perfect match with what we already have on the board, as in the shape here of this body. So in order to do this, I'm now going to edit this shape. I'm going to double click it so I enter here this isolation mode. The reason I'm doing this is because that's going to allow me to work only on this shape and not on all the other elements that are on the board. So it's a way of working that keeps it simple and clean and doesn't mix up with whatever else you already have drawn. Now I'm gonna paste in front the body part that I've just copied. To paste in front, you can use Command F, Control F, or you can just use here Edit, Paste in Front. Now, what I'm gonna do is select everything I have, and using pathfinders, I'm just going to divide this shape. As you can see, we have now 3 shapes. This here is going to be our shadow. So I'm going to cut it out. The reason I cut it out instead of just copying or doing some other things is for cleaning up purposes. I will show you why later. Everything looks clean in the end. I'm just going to select everything and delete it, exit the mode, and now what I'm gonna do is place my selection where it should be on this body. So it needs to come in the order of the layers in between here, the body and the face. The face here is at the top, the body is at the back. So because Illustrator pastes things usually according to the order of existing layers, if I select this and paste in front, Illustrator has now pasted the part exactly in between the two where it should be. All I can do now is just color it in and of course change the opacity. And there we go. Now I have a perfect shadow that matches both the shape of my face here but also that's a perfect fit to the other elements I have that are part of this body. So this is the biggest perk of using the method, the cookie cutter. You can just create the outline or the stroke for something, even a shadow, and then using the original shape that it's going to later be a part of or come on top of, you can just cut the shape and paste it in front, and you're not going to get funny result around the edges or anything. Another method to align anchor points and shapes together properly is to use the smart guides. So for those who don't know, smart guides are an integrated feature of Adobe Illustrator that gives you information as you hover over a shape, or even just so you can align things properly as you draw. The way you activate the functionality, if it's not already on, is you just go to the View menu and then choose here Smart Guides. Or of course the other way is just to use the keyboard shortcuts Command or Control U. Once the feature is turned on, each time you hover over an object, you can see that a blue outline appears around it, and also the center here has a little cross to mark it. When you also hover over anchor points and paths, it tells you, and for anchor point it gives you the Y and the X coordinates as well. It comes in quite handy for simple things to draw. For instance, here what I want to do is just create a cover, a top for the box I have here. So I'm just going to use the functionality and follow the path, and simply, as you can see, my path is being snapped here to a grid, an invisible grid. I'm just going to use this, and here, there you go. Now I have a cover to my box. Now, I see that if I zoom in, the anchor points here of the shape at the back of this were not aligned properly together. So let me already show you a little bit of how to use the X and the Y axes, as we're going to now fix this. So in order to do so, I'm going to switch to the Properties panel here on the right. And as you can see here, I have an anchor point selected, and I can see that I have some X and some Y values on where exactly on my artboard this anchor point has been aligned. So what I want to do now is use this shape as a reference, as it's aligned properly at the perfect place. And I want to copy some of these values to make sure that what's a little offset here next to it falls exactly in place in the same area. So my drawing is perfect and is correct. So I go back to here, the reference shape, and I can see that on the anchor point above, it's the vertical alignment that's not correct, which would mean it's the Y-axis. So as the Y-axis of the shape here is correct, I'm going to simply copy the value here. I'll use the direct selection tool to select the path that's a little off, well, the anchor point that's a little off. I'm going to go to its Y value, erase it, and paste in the correct one. And boom, as you can see, it's now aligned. So it means also, if the top wasn't aligned, chances are the bottom has the exact same problem. So I'm gonna now make the correction here as well. So I'm gonna use the Y reference here, because I know for a fact it's exactly what I want to. I'm gonna isolate this shape here, because otherwise I'll have a harder time trying to do that. And I'm just gonna copy and validate the Y value. And as you can see now, my shape is perfectly falling together and it looks neat and precise. The third method I'm now going to show you is more for complex shapes. The first drawing I showed you was, for instance, a body with a face, you know, and usually when you do such kind of drawings, you want both parts of your face or the body to be symmetric. So when you do that, you're not going to draw everything in one go, because chances are that the left part and the right part are not going to be the same. So what I usually do in these cases is I'm going to draw a half of my object, whether right or left, it doesn't really matter. whatever feels best with you. I'm going to be aligning them to a guide here. And as you can see, the top anchor points are more or less falling with that guide. Not exactly, but for what we're going to do today, it doesn't matter very much. So what I will do now is I'm going to select both pieces that I've drawn to create my objects, and I'm just going to duplicate them using the Option key and the Shift key. So Alt and Shift. Now that I have the copy, I'm just going to flip it by right-clicking using Transform Reflect. Of course, what I want here is a reflection of the vertical axis, so I'm just going to validate this. I'm going to nudge my shape a little, just so it matches more or less the guide. Deselect. Oh, the guide was copied too. What I will do is select here the two anchor points using the direct selection tool, and I'm going to use Command J on my keyboard, which is going to merge them into a single path instead of two separate paths. As you can see now here at the top, the fact that I have two anchor points so close to one another isn't super precise, and if I now do this, it's not really arranging the problem for me. I think the best would be to clean up. So what I'll do here is I'll use the pen tool to remove anchor points, and I'll simply remove one of them. And as you can see now, it's a lot more precise and correct looking. Gonna do the same here down the bottom. Select here using the direct selection tool, both these anchor point. Command or Control J is going to make them merge together, or at least come onto a single path. I'm just gonna do this so it looks nice. I'm going to close the rest of the shape here. Again, selecting, joining, and I like things to be ultra clean, so I'm just going to remove these unnecessary anchor points now. And as you can see now, I have a perfect fleur-de-lis. The left part and the right part are exactly the same. So earlier on I showed you that you could use the X and the Y axes of objects or anchor points to make them come together in the nicest of the way on your board. I think it's one of the highest methods, the highest precision methods to make things come together in a nice way. If, for instance, I decided to now create a mosaic of pictures, let's say these shapes are pictures, it's not always the best and the most precise way to just glide them and slide them across, as what you will find is a lot of the time it's not really visible to the naked eye, but if you zoom in really closely, you can see sometimes here and there that you will have little gaps in between your objects. And of course, this is not what we want. We want these objects to come nicely together, because what will happen as I fill in here this canvas is I'm gonna have like little white borders, objects are not going to fall in perfectly together, and this isn't what we're looking for. So in order to make a perfect mosaic, what I've done here is I've created a drawing board that's 5,000 pixels across and down, and the boxes here that represent the pictures are 1,000 pixels in width and in height. So simply having multiples of one another is going to ensure that I will achieve the highest possible result when it comes to quality and alignment. The first step I'm going to be looking at here is making sure that the ruler for my artboard is settling in on perfect zero here at the top left corner. So here on the ruler, if you look in between the X and the Y axes, you have this little zone here with a small cross that's drawn. Click it, maintain your click down, and drag it to the top of your artboard. Release, and you can now see that my ruler is set to 0 for the y-axis and for the x-axis. So should make everything a lot easier to align. Since we're going to be using the top left corner, as you can see here, the point that's going to be the reference for doing this is set to the middle of my shape, which is not really handy here. So I'm just going to click the top left corner, and you can see now the X and the Y axes are actually matching my drawing board. So now I know it's perfectly aligned. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure for every single picture or shape I'm going to put here on the board that they also match this value. So as you can see here, this is 1000 pixels in width. So of course the top left corner of the next shape should come at 1000 pixels. So I can just keep on going, you know, and make sure all of these shapes are properly aligned. Sometimes it happens in the process that you have a couple of pixels that are off. You can just go to the X value here in this case, correct, and here, as you can see, I have a perfect alignment. Here again on the Y-axis, same story. So X should be 0, of course, because we're aligned with the 0 line, and we're down 1000 pixels. So here the top left should be on 1000. And you can use this method, always checking the X and the Y, and in the end you should have, yeah, the most accurate alignment you could actually get working with pictures or whatever else it is you have on your artboard. I really strongly suggest you use the method here and not simply use the smart guides or visual cues, because yeah, it happened to me in the past and results aren't what you would expect them to be. So always check here the properties and the transform box to make sure the X and the Y's are properly aligned. The next method I'm going to be showing you is to use the trace mode. And the reason that I like the trace mode is because a lot of the time when I create complex things, I already have a lot going on my artboard. And just all these bits and pieces coming together doesn't make it easy for me to work. Or it can be sometimes that you have a stroke, like an outline to an object, and strokes don't necessarily make it easy to get the perfect alignment for whatever it is you are doing. So just as a rule of thumb, the best way to align a stroke ideally would be to the center, if you want to then use some alignment features, because smart guides as a general rule do not like when the stroke is on the inside or even when it's on the outside. What I've found is to have the more precise results, they would be best to be aligned in the middle. Also, as a general rule, the smaller you're going to draw something, the harder it's going to get for you to really align everything perfectly. So what I strongly suggest is, and it's what I do also, is always draw a lot bigger than what you're going to need for the final result, whatever it is, you know, a map or just some random portrait or other things. It's best to draw a lot bigger, because then you're going to have more room to work with your paths and to make your corrections. Because working small, you're also constrained when it comes to the pixels, and the alignment of your final work is not going to be as precise as whatever it is you want to do. So here I'm going to show another method that I use, which is just basically aligning strokes. And getting that right already does a lot in your work and is going to simplify your life greatly. The example I will do here is just simply creating a box. It's something simple. I might have done it quicker with other methods, but think about applying this method to objects that can be a lot more complex. And then you will have a big win, because this is a method that's going to make it super clean and easy for you. So once your path is properly aligned, what I'm going to do to create my box here is duplicate the shape here. That's going to be the lid, the top of the box. So this will be the bottom of my box. What I'm going to do now is just copy the top box, click to select the bottom one, double click it so I get into isolation mode. As I told you before, isolation mode is nice so that I don't interfere with anything else on the artboard while I'm doing this. I'm just going to paste in front by using Command or Control F, or you can go to Edit and paste in front. Now, I'm going to use this and also combine the trace mode. And the reason that I'm going to use the trace mode, and why you should when everything gets a lot more complex on your artboard is for precision. Sometimes when you have a stroke that's a little thick, it can be that you're not seeing exactly where you're putting your anchor points. Here, for instance, you can see I have a 20-point stroke. So what I will do is just, switch to that other view. Now in trace mode, all I'm seeing is the outline of my shape, so I'm not bothered by my strokes or by anything else. So what I can do now using these paths is just here. As you can see, the smart guides are indicating that I'm in the middle of my shape. Though be careful because they're not always precise like I said before. And I can just here hold down shift so I'm making a straight line and nicely do this. I'm going to also turn the filling off, remove the filling of the shape, because that filling is actually going to create a shape of its own later on if I don't. What you can also do to make your life easier is add anchor points so that everything else aligns with these anchor points. As you can see, the top shape here of the lid of my box, so to speak, the anchor points that create this shape are here on the 45 degrees angles. The reason is because initially it was created as a circle, but then I applied some effects to it to make it isometric. So what I'm gonna do is align here a path to the center of my shape. So I'm just gonna press plus on my keyboard so I can add an anchor point. And there I have. In many cases, it really helps for more complex stuff. Now I'm just gonna do the same here on this side. As you can see, it takes into account the anchor point I've just created, so it's helping me to align. I'm gonna hold shift so I create a straight line. And here we are. I'm just gonna remove the filling. Gonna select everything and I'm going to divide my shape. While everything is selected, I'm also going to apply the same fill and stroke to everything, as sometimes you also have transparent pieces that get created when you use pathfinders. And what I'm going to do now is, using just the simple pointer tool, select all the shapes that are interesting to my drawing right now. I'm gonna cut them. And this kind of ties back to where I was explaining at the beginning the reason why I was cutting. I was talking about little bits and pieces that can become parasites or contaminate your drawing. And this is exactly the reason. Sometimes when you use pathfinders to divide shapes or just to create other more complex objects, one of the byproducts can be those little anchor points or bits and pieces that are left on your artboard or that will be part of the group your shape is in. So simply taking what you're interested in and select everything else and delete it is going to make sure you're left with none of these parasitic anchor points or vectors. Now I'm just merging my shape together. I can exit this mode, and as you can see, I now have a perfect shape. The last method I'm going to be showing you concerning precision and aligning things is using shapes. Shapes are a great way to get quickly to whatever it is you want to draw and have it done perfectly in a very geometric way. Now, I sometimes see people taking the time to try and draw, a circle or whatever, but yeah, this looks iffy and not correct. So, of course, I'm going to stick to my shapes. They just make my life so much easier and everything so much quicker. Sometimes we also use shapes to create other shapes because it's a lot easier. Now, if I want a half circle, I could do this, for example, but I don't really like the method because it's not always clean. As I told you earlier, if you work quite small, you may have some issues with the way some of your anchor points are gonna fall. And sometimes using the method, when you get two anchor points on top of one another, it makes your shape a little more dirty, not so clean to work with. And if you then try to remove those anchor points, you're more than likely going to mess around with the Bezier curve, and what you have on the screen is not gonna look so clean. So the way I do it, nice and easy, is I'm just gonna have my direct selection tool ready. I'm gonna select here the anchor point I wanna get rid of. I will remove it, which will remove half of my circle here, which means I now have an open shape. And to make it whole again, I'm just going to use the Unite option of the Pathfinders here. And there we go, boom. No excess anchor point, nice, clean, and I haven't lost any other functionalities I may want to use. When aligning shapes, you can also align shapes one on top of the other if you're trying to draw something a little more special. What I see people sometimes doing is just use the ellipse tool and then do this. That's of course quite nice, but the issue using this is that, yeah, sometimes, especially if you draw small, things are not gonna always be perfectly aligned with one another, which is exactly what we want to do here. So instead of using the ellipse tool again and taking the risk of perhaps not having everything come nicely the way I will want to, I'm going to just make a copy here of the shape. I'm going to use the paste in front option, so Control or Command F. I'll use the Alt/Option key and Shift, and I'm just going to change the size here of the copy of the object I've made. That way I'm 100% certain that the center is going to be aligned no matter what. This works well with circles and with squares, but what if I want to now use a shape that's a little more complex, like let's say the star or the rectangular marquee I have here? It's not going to be so much of the same. If I copy and paste in front, I now have a new occurrence of the object I can just resize. But as you can already see, the precision here is not exactly what I want. The shape isn't exactly in the center. Well, technically it is, but given that a star is a more complex shape, this is, yeah, it could be a little better. So instead of nudging and playing around with this, I have another method I'm going to show you in a moment. The same apply, of course, to this rectangular marquee. You know, if I wanted to make a copy of this or to have another rectangle within this one, if I do this, I'm going to have quite random results, and I may want to play around a little bit, just, you know, so it comes together nicely. And even here, just copying and pasting in front, if I try to just, yeah, reshape the original rectangle and, you know, constraint to the proportion, as you can see, the alignment I have on the top is not the same as on the sides, so it's problematic again. I could use the Option key, you know, and try to fiddle around for a while to make this come together nicely, but that's not really precise once more. So the best way to go around this problem when you have complex objects or shapes is select your object. In the object menu, go to Paths here, and in Paths you have an option called Offset Path. When you do that, it allows you to create an outline path within or outside of the shape you already have. So here, as you can see, it's set on 100 pixels outside of the original shape. Yeah, you can feed it negative values, it works just as well, which is a terrific option about this little filter. Now here, you can either leave things the way they are, or one I sometimes use when I have more gentle shapes is just the round joints. If I do this now, you can see automatically it's going to round up the sharp edges of my star. And of course the same applies here to our rectangular marquee. I want this to be super clean and I want this to be perfectly aligned, so I'm again going to use this option. I'm gonna make this, stay just the way it were. And the perfect thing about here doing this is here in between my two rectangles, it's always regarding the edges. I will always have on each side exactly minus 100 pixels between the original shape and the new created one. So there we go. Now there's one very last thing I would like to show you. I almost forgot about it, so here it is. Of course, vectors are amazing because they allow you to be super specific and super precise, and it's, I think, possibly one of the reasons many of us are such big fans of them. When you create, you can also, of course, use the guides that are within Adobe Illustrator. And some of you may not know this, but you can always, of course, unlock your guides and use them to be super creative, just like rotate them so you can make a grid to do some isometric drawing, for example. What you need to do is first go into the view menu, and then you have here guides, and you can lock and unlock guides here. Or there's also a given shortcut depending on your keyboard and the version of Illustrator you are running. So here I've already done just that. I've pulled a guide and I've left it on the canvas, now 2 of them. You can see when they are selected, of course, because there's a new highlight color over them. To rotate them, it's just that easy. Select your guide, then use rotate. And as you can see here, it now asks you for an angle. So if you're going to do some isometric drawing, you can set it on 30 degrees. And you can even just Option Alt drag them to make copies, and you can even reflect them. So what I want to say about this is guides are an amazing way to do your work and to help you go by. So don't be afraid if you're going to draw something a little out of the ordinary, a little special, to just use them and duplicate them around your canvas so you can make your very own grid for isometric drawing or for perspective drawing. And of course, using these together combined with the smart guides, you can actually achieve something which is, a lot easier to create, because as you can see, they're snapped to one another. So yeah. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you really appreciated all this information. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and of course to share this video. And I hope to see you very soon. Bye!